In today's video, we are going to be using Python's turtle module to code ourselves this building. As you can see, it is just made up of some simple shapes that we have already learnt about in previous tutorials. We've got some rectangles, squares, and a circle. And we just overlap them on top of each other to get the desired look for this building. To get started on this tutorial today, we need to head over to our Python editor. I'm using Mu. And the first line of code we need to type in is the same as always when we're drawing in Python. You draw it from turtle, import star. That's just saying from the turtle module, which is just a library of code written by somebody else, we're going to import all the functions inside of it. That's what that little star means. Okay, so now that we've got access to all those functions, we can start drawing on the screen. When we're drawing today, we're going to set our speed to 0, which is the quickest drawing speed possible. And we're going to set a BG color, which is your background color, to black. Now the first shape I'm going to draw on this building is this dome that you see here on top of the building. That's actually a circle, but we've just chopped off half of it by placing some other shapes on top of it. So let's draw ourselves a circle. I'm going to put in a comment that says dome. And first of all, I'm going to lift my pen up off the page and go to my starting coordinates, which is just off center. I'm going to stay on 0 for the x-axis and go up a little bit to 20 on the y-axis. Once in position, we'll put the pen back down so we're ready to start drawing. The color I want to use today for this dome is saddlebrown. Now you might have noticed too that I have got a bit of a brownish color scheme going on here. So the colors that I've chosen come from this document here, which has a list of all the different colors we can use with the turtle. Okay, so I've just selected a few browns out of here. You don't have to do that. You can use whatever colors you want. Okay, but I'm just going with browns today. So feel free to copy along with me if you want. Okay, so we've set our color up for the dome. That means we can turn our fill on and begin drawing. And to draw a circle, it's as simple as writing the word circle and typing the radius size inside the brackets. So I want it to be 100 steps in size. And after that, we'll just end the fill, which will make sure that our circle gets coloured in with that fill colour that we chose just a little bit earlier. That's it. That's how we draw a dome, or in this case, it's a circle at the moment on the screen. So save what you've got. I'm just going to save this as building and give it a run. And you should have a dome, or as I said before, a circle on your screen at the moment, which will soon cover up and turn into a dome. Alright, so far so good. That's the dome done. The next shape we're going to draw is one of the rectangles, which is going to go down the bottom here. So we're going to do this bottom rectangle. So I'm going to put in a comment underneath the dome code that says bottom rectangle. And to do the bottom rectangle, we're going to need to lift our pen up off the page first of all and go to our new set of coordinates, which are quite simple, minus 200 and minus 200 for both the x and the y axis. Once in position, put your pen down on the page. And we're going to stick with the saddlebrown color, so we don't need to change any of that right now. We'll turn our fill on by typing in the begin fill function. And we're simply going to draw a rectangle. Now the quickest way to draw a rectangle is using a loop. So I'm just going to say for I in range 2, which means we're going to repeat the following code that I write twice. First of all, we're going to go forward 400 pixels along the bottom of the page there. Then I'm going to do a left-hand turn at 90 degrees, and we're going to go up, which is still forward, 20 steps. And then we're going to turn left 90 degrees one more time. And these 4 lines of indented code are what are going to be repeated 2 times. Because that's what I've told the computer to do in my for loop just here. Once you're done, jump out of that loop by moving your mouse cursor back to the left side of the page and add in the line of code that says end fill, which will make sure that our rectangle gets filled in. Let's give it a run and have a look. There we go. So we've got our rectangle that goes on the bottom of the building drawn. Alright, coming in next, we're going to draw the next rectangle that sits on top of that one. So we'll just call this in our comment second from bottom rectangle. Alright, and it's pretty similar code to what we just wrote. So let's cheat a little bit here and do a copy and paste job. I'm going to copy all of that code that I just wrote in for the bottom rectangle. Press Ctrl C to copy it. And I'm going to go down to where I've got my comment in for the second from bottom rectangle and paste that code in. Now, there's just a few touch-ups we need to make to this code. Where we've got the goto, the second line of code here, change your coordinates to -175 and -180. Okay, so -175 for the x value, -180 for the y value. Once we put our pen down, we need to put in a new line beneath that and just change the color of this rectangle to chocolate. And the rest of the code is going to be pretty similar. We'll only have to make the rectangle a bit smaller. So we're going to have to change this forward here to 350. Everything else is good to go. So that there is the code for the second from the bottom rectangle. Save it and run it. You'll see now you've got this chocolate coloured rectangle sitting on top of the saddle brown rectangle at the bottom. Okay, so that's the bottom of our building done. What we're going to do now is the main part of the building, which is that really big section, which is almost a square shape. Let me just go to the example. So this lighter coloured section in the middle here. It's still a rectangle, but looks a bit more like a square. But anyway, let's start drawing it. So I'm going to put in a comment that says main part of building. And again, similar code to what we just typed in. So let's do it again. Copy what we just wrote in. So Ctrl C to copy it. Head down below, paste it in. Okay, first thing we need to do is lift our pen up. I'm going to go to a new set of coordinates of -150, -160. So the x-axis is -150, and we're going down -160 on the y-axis. Once there, we put our pen down, ready to start drawing. Now the colour we're going with this time is called sandy brown. So again, another different shade of brown. Turn our fill on and we'll start drawing up our rectangle. Now the size that we need to use here is going to be 300 in the first box. And for the forward down the bottom here, it's going to be 250. Alright, so that should be enough to get the main part of our building done, just with that section of code there. So save it, run it. And there you go, we've got the main part of the building done. You can start to see this circle turning into a dome as well. What we need to do now is just whack 2 more rectangles across the top of this, and we will be done with the body, or the main section of our building. Alright, so the next one we're going to do is the second from the top rectangle. So let's put in a comment that says second from top rectangle. And yep, you guessed it, we're going to be using pretty similar code to what we just typed in. In fact, I'm going to copy this one up here, the one that has chocolate in the code, because we're going to be using the same chocolate color. Okay, so we lift our pen up. This time we're going to go to, we're going to leave it as -175 actually. It's the y-axis we want to change. We want to move it up the page a fair bit. So we're going to go into the positives now. We're going to go to -175 for the x-axis, 90 for the y-axis. Once in position, we put our pen down. Color's chocolate. We begin our fill, and I think actually the rest of this is going to be fine. So let's just leave that and test it, just to make sure this second from top rectangle looks good, which it does. Very nice. Alright, that leaves us with just the top rectangle to go. So let's just put in a comment that says top rectangle. And one more time, we're just copying and pasting the code from above. So I've already copied it, so I'm just going to paste it in. So this top rectangle has coordinates of -150 for the x-axis, and it's just going to be 110 for the y-axis. The color this time is going to be one called sienna, which is just another shade of brown. And for our size, we're going to go to 300 for the first forward, and everything else should be exactly the same. Okay, so that's your code there for the final rectangle, which is the one that sits on top of the building. Let's have a look. If we save it and run it, there we go. So I've got the main section of our building all done. We're now going to get into the tricky stage where we start to draw the windows on the building. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got 12 little windows, all exactly the same size and same color. So it would make sense to use a loop to make these windows. So rather than just draw, I will write the code for 12 individual windows, which would go on forever. I think we can use a loop to shorten that down, just make our code a little bit simpler. Alright, so let's head over and have a look at how we do this. Okay, so underneath that top rectangle, I'm just going to make a bit of room down below. Now, to do this, I'm going to put in a comment that says Windows. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to set up two variables. One of them is going to be called X, and that's going to be equal to minus 125. And my second variable that I'm making up is going to be my Y variable, and that's going to be set to 30. These two numbers here are actually going to be the coordinates where we start drawing our first little window up here. Okay, but I'll talk more about that in just a moment. One more thing I want to put in now, and that's the color of the windows. So I'm going like a light yellowy kind of color, which is called khaki. So just put khaki in brackets there to set up the color for your windows. Now the first thing we do to draw these windows is we simply draw the first window in the building. So this one right here. Okay, so I'm going to put in a comment that says draw a single window. Okay, and because I want to use this code 12 times to draw the 12 different windows, I'm going to use something called a function. Now a function is like a reusable snippet of code. So the code that I use here to make a window, I'm going to reuse it later on to draw the other windows. Okay, so that's what a function is all about. To make a function, we need to write def, which is short for define. We're defining a function. And we need to give this function a name, like we do with variables. Okay, I'm just going to call it window, since we're drawing a window. And I'm going to put a bracket opening and a bracket closing at the end of that. So this just says we're defining a function called window, remembering that a function is just a little snippet of code that we can reuse time and time again. After the brackets, we need to put a colon and press enter. And your mouse cursor will become indented. And that's just showing you anything that's indented underneath this line of code here will be part of the function. Alright, now the next thing we need to do is we need to lift our pen up off the page. We need to go to our new coordinates to start this window. Now remember I said we set these coordinates already up here in these variables X and Y. So instead of typing in numbers down here, we're just going to type X, comma Y. Okay, and that will take us to these coordinates, minus 125 for X and 30 for Y. Once we're in position, we can put our pen down on the page. The color's already set to khaki, we know that, so let's just begin our fill. Now to draw a square, I'm just going to use a loop. So for I in range. Now with squares, we know all sides are equal, so I'm going to repeat the following code 4 times. We're going to go forward 40 steps and turn left at 90 degrees. Once we've done that, we'll just jump out of the loop and end the fill so that those windows get coloured in with that khaki colour. Alright. That should be enough for now. I'll just at least save it and test it to see if it's working. Okay, it's not working yet, and I'll explain why. What we've done in our code is we've defined this function called window and told the computer how to make it. Okay, but for the computer to actually draw the window, we need to tell it that we want to run this little snippet of code, or this function. And the way we do that is quite easy. We just call up the name of that function and tell the computer to run it. Okay, so we just do something like this. We just write window, bracket, bracket. And that's it. And by writing that line of code in, the computer will swing back up here where it's got the function called window, and it will run everything inside of it. Okay, let me show you again what happens. There we go. So now that we've called up that window function, this just here, to run, it goes back up and runs all of that code to draw the first window. Okay, so that looks good. Now what we want to do next is we want to move over here, which is actually 70 steps across, to draw the second window. Okay, so we need to change our X value. So our X axis. Okay, we want to move along that a little bit. So, still inside of this function here, what I want you to do after the end fill is just write X equals X plus 70. So it takes this current X position, which is minus 125, and we're going to save over it with a new number, which is going to be 70 pixels to the right, or 70 steps to the right, sorry. Okay, now if I run this, we should get an error. Let me just see. There we go. We got an error saying local variable X referenced before assignment. Okay, one little trick here is when we make a function, okay, if we want to have access to this variable up here, we actually have to write a special line of code at the start of this function that says global X. Okay, and I'm just going to put a comment here to explain that. It just ensures that X can be used inside of this function. Okay, at the moment, before that function was written there, X could be used anywhere in our code except for this function. Okay, now that we've written the line global X, we can use the X value anywhere in our code. Okay, including inside of this function. I know this is getting a bit confusing now, but now that we've written global X, the computer will recognize X and it will be able to do this little calculation to move our window across 70 steps. Alright, so if I run it now, we shouldn't get an error message. We'll only get one window still, but as you can see, no error message. Okay, so that's looking good. Now looking at our building, we've got 4 windows in one row. So I want to complete this top row of windows first of all. Alright, so what I'm going to do is back in my code, I'm going to actually delete this window function where I call up the window function to run just for a moment. I'm going to put in a comment that says draw the windows. Okay, and I'm going to write for I in range 4. Remember, we're drawing 4 windows in this first row. And what we're going to do is simply run the window function 4 times. Okay, so just by writing in that, we should be able to run this code here 4 times. Let's give it a run and see what happens. There we go. So we've now got the first row of windows completed simply by using 2 lines of code. Okay, pretty easy. What we need to do now though is add in the next row and the next row. So in total we've got 3 rows there that we need to repeat. And again, we can use a loop to do that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is repeat this three times in total. So I need to make another for loop above it all. So I'm just going to write for I in range 3, colon. And I'm going to indent both of those 2 lines by highlighting them and pressing tab. That just pushes them across to say these 2 lines are going to be repeated 3 times in total to make the 3 rows of the windows. Okay, now just watch what happens here. It's not going to work properly yet. I just want to show you what happens when we repeat it 3 more times. It just makes one gigantic row of windows. Okay, and the reason being is that each time we loop around, we haven't told the computer to go back to the original X position, which is X equals minus 125. So let's copy that line of code and tell the computer each time it completes a row of windows that it needs to go back to X equals minus 125. Okay, so I've put it in just here below both of those for loops, and just have a look at how far I've indented it. I've indented it one tab stop. Okay, the other thing we need to do is we need to tell the computer to move down the page to make the next row of windows. Just watch what happens here when I do run this. It'll do 1 row of windows, but then it will come back to the start and just draw the next row of windows and then the next row of windows straight over what already exists. We need to tell it to move down the page a little bit. Okay, so I need to set the Y value here as well. So I'm going to write Y equals Y minus 85 steps. That means each time we complete a row of windows, we're going to jump down the page 85 steps to do the next row of windows. Alright, I know this is super confusing, but let's just give it a run and we'll see what happens. So it's the first row, second row, third row. Okay, and that's basically our building done. You can see in the bottom corner here we've got this little turtle symbol still visible on our screen. Let's get rid of that by adding a final line of code in that says hide turtle, bracket, bracket. And now when you run it, that little turtle will disappear once everything's drawn. There we go, so that is a clean looking building. I just want to add a few comments in now just to explain a bit of this bottom section to you. In case you need to come back and have a look at it at a later stage, I want to make sure that it makes a little bit of sense to you, okay, especially this last bit here. Okay, so what we want to do is we've got the comment saying we're drawing the windows, we know that. Okay, this loop here will draw 3 rows of windows. Okay, so we can put that in, and then on the line below it, we'll say this loop will draw 1 row of 4 windows. Okay, and then coming down a little bit lower where we've got x equals minus 125, put a comment there that says ensures all rows of windows start from the same x position. And then the last one there, we'll say there's the next row of windows down lower than the previous. Okay, so there's a few comments just to help explain what is going on in this bottom section of code, because I know it is super confusing. But apart from that, I think we are done. Alright, actually I might put a comment just here, sorry. So there's the next window over 70 steps to the right. Okay, there we go. So now we are done. Fair few comments in there just to explain in simple English what's going on in our code. So save it, run it, make sure you've got that building working. Alright, that looks sick. Okay, so that is how you can create a particular type of building using Python code.